Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. Please take your seats. Don't forget to sign in if you're a member. Don't forget to sign in if you're a guest. Okay. May I please see a show of hands from everybody who went to the rally on Saturday? Woo! How fabulous was that? And Lynn and Steve Max made these fabulous signs. I will demonstrate for you how we were able to wear them in the pouring rain, like this. Yes, I grew up on Carol Merrill. Anyway, so that's the first thing. So thank you all for... Can I please have your attention? Can I please have your attention? The meeting is starting. Wendy Diller, who's standing up over here with the pink shirt, wave your hand, is accepting returned postcards. I will make that announcement repeatedly. So anyway, back to the rally. It was really fabulous. Apparently, someone just told me there were 100,000 people in New York City alone. It was super great, super great. That's actually why he pulled back on the tariffs today, was because of that rally. That's a joke. Thank you, I thought so too. So I do want to say the most important thing besides hearing from Micah Lasher tonight is I do want to say that, does everybody know what's happening at May 4th, Sunday, May 4th, at the Ellington from 4 to 6 p.m.? No? I will tell you. It is the 50th, count them, 50th anniversary of Three Parks Independent Democrats. We would love for you all to come. There is a special member rate. If you have paid your dues, which are $25, you can come to the benefit for $60. The levels after that are $200 for friend, but the really exciting part is above that level because you get your name on the invitation. So please go to the website. Please sign up to come. Please pay your membership dues so that you can come to the benefit for $60. I'm sorry? And 10 copies of the sponsor letter. If somebody wants a copy of the sponsor letter, a hard copy, instead of going to the website, you can pick these up on the back table. Something else on the back table that I want to tell everybody about is Brad Lander is doing a town hall on Monroe Street in Brooklyn Heights on May 6th. So if you feel like going to Brooklyn Heights on May 6th, please pick up a copy of the flyer in the back. We also have two more things that are going to happen. One is that one of our board members, Paul Froelich, and the rest of the Trump Resistance Committee have developed a resolution that we would love to read to you and have you pass because it will enable us to work on all of the economic issues that are making everything go into the toilet, except for the stock market. And then after we hear from Micah, and then we're going to hear from Micah after Paul reads the resolution, and after we hear from Micah, Teresa, our district leader, is going to present an award. So you'll have to stick around to hear about that. Paul, would you like to come up and read the resolution?
There's a copy of the resolution on every seat. And it is the combined resolution on the economy and affordability. Whereas the Trump administration has announced extreme new economic programs, initiatives, and directives that will cause irreparable harm to workers and the economy. Whereas those initiatives include imposing broad economic tariffs on raw materials and foreign goods entering the United States, which have been criticized by economists as threatening to raise prices, increase inflation, and start a global trade war. Whereas those initiatives include massive wholesale layoffs of federal employees without individual evaluation or notice, resulting in their loss of income and any job security. And whereas these initiatives include instituting mass deportations of undocumented immigrants, which result in increased inflation and disruptions and shortages of workers in many key industries. Whereas these initiatives include enacting obscene tax cuts for the wealthy and big business, which economists warn will result in decreased services and will exacerbate the fast-growing disparity in wealth between the ultra-wealthy and everyone else. And whereas these initiatives include a tax on unions and workers in both government and private business, resulting in workers having fewer protections and average incomes being reduced, all while government-funded health care and retirement programs are decimated. And whereas federal budget cuts threatened and imposed by the Trump administration will drastically affect New York City and New York State's current and future budgets. And therefore, be it resolved that Three Parks Independent Democrats supports all peaceful efforts to fight federal policies that cut New York City and New York State budgets, increase inflation, the cost of groceries, the cost of medical care, and the cost of housing, disrupt small businesses, attack labor unions, and decrease worker protections and incomes. There you have it.
Thank you, Paul. Do we have any comments on the resolution before we vote? Yes, sir.
What is the source of the resolution, and will there be another one? Because there's a lot missing.
So what we do in this club, the process is that we introduce a resolution, we have the club vote on it, and that allows us to, for example, Xerox flyers that we hand out in the street, get people to sign petitions. We don't do a lump sum resolution that covers absolutely everything. Back in January, we did a resolution specifically regarding immigrants. This resolution is related to the economy. There may be other resolutions in the future to cover other topics. Can I get a motion? We don't have to pass a resolution regarding climate change because this club has done an extensive amount of work on the ecology and environmental rights. We fought for the closure of Indian Point for 6 years. We fought for a ban on fracking for 4 years. We've always been very involved, so we have resolutions that go back several years that allow us to use the club's resources to fight back on degradation of the climate and other things. We do resolutions on new issues. We already have a set of resolutions. They're all on the website regarding older issues. For example, when we do stuff on Social Security, we've been doing that for over 25 years, so we don't have to pass a resolution. Does that clear up any confusion you may have had? No, you just can look at the website. You can see we have the title for every resolution. I'm sorry, there was a hand. Oh, sorry. Elaine. Thank you very much. Can I get a second? All right, all those in favor? Any nays? Thank you very much. The resolution passes. All right. Without further ado, I just want to have you all give a very warm welcome to our Assembly member, Micah Lasher, who marched the entire march on Saturday, in addition to everything else he does to move forward progressive causes.
Well, good evening. To all of my friends at Three Parks. It is a pleasure to be with you, and not just because I'm not in Albany this evening. I will tell you, we had scheduled this some time ago with the uncertainty of when we would have a state budget, and we are certainly living up to that uncertainty and then some. But I saw Danielle, I saw a number of you over the weekend at the march, and I said, I will be there on Wednesday. And so we drove back this afternoon. I'm very glad to be with you, and I will be taking off at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning to get up to Albany to vote on a budget extender. But I'm pleased to be with you. You know, I'm absolutely. And I had such a it was a heartening and invigorating time to be with many of you on Saturday at the march, and I think we all felt the the gathering energy and voice, not just here in New York, but across the country, of people really speaking out about what is happening in our country. And I'm going to speak about that this evening. And then a number of us were together again on Sunday for some very good local news, which was after 20 years, the community has in effect taken control of the Metro Theater at Broadway and 99th Street. And it's enormously exciting, and I was very pleased to work with Senator Hoylman Siegel, and I went to the governor actually before I took office, as we were in December, and the deadline loomed for the Upper West Side Cinema Center, and it was clear that we were not going to, that despite incredible private fundraising efforts, that it was going to fall a bit short of the, more than a bit, well short of the $7 million necessary to buy the theater. I reached out to Governor Hochul, and I said, you know, there's a lot going on in the country, there's a lot going on in New York, in the state, but if there is one thing that would mean a lot to my neighbors on the Upper West Side, it would be saving the Metro Theater, and she was willing to do that. And so I was incredibly excited about that. We have a long road ahead. For those of you who don't know, the building was gutted. So what you basically have is a shell of a building. And so the process of rebuilding, stabilizing the building in the near term, and then actually building out a theater, it's going to be years. We have a lot more money to raise, but I think that this was really the critical thing was just getting control of this building for the community. So it's enormously exciting. Thank you very much. And thank you, and by the way, and this club, and members of this club, I see Liza here, this club really has been the epicenter of generating community energy around this effort, and it's really incredible. So I have now 3 months and change into my time as your assembly member. It is a radically different landscape than the landscape and the issues that we were talking about a year ago when, with your support, I was out on the street running for the office. And I have sort of decided, and I should say, by the way, I'm here, my Chief of Staff, Claire Botnick, is here, and our neighbor, and she's here. She is leading an amazing team at 104th Street, while I am most of the time up in Albany. But we have basically decided, obviously we are working every day to run a constituent-focused district office, and I'm really pleased with what it feels to me like the word has gone out now in the community that office is open for service and there to help, and we've seen a dramatic increase in the number of calls and visits we're getting from people who need assistance with various government issues. I'm very proud of that, and that is, of course, the bread and butter work of a local elected official. But we basically decided that we're going to spend as much of our time and energy thinking about ways that the state can protect New Yorkers from what is happening in Washington. And that is obviously a challenging proposition because there is a regime that is taking control of every arm of government, of our federal government, and with that comes an enormous amount of power. And our system of federalism provides only for so much mitigation of that damage that you can do at the state level. But I have sort of taken it on as my mission to try to be as creative and strategic as I can be in trying to mitigate, respond to, prevent, and fight back against the damage coming out of D.C. And at the front, I left a stack of photocopies. On one side is a New York Times article that covers a bunch of the work that I'm going to talk to you about, and on the other side was a piece that I wrote in the New Republic about the power of blue states to respond to what is happening in Washington. And just as what is happening in Washington is unfolding very quickly, the scale and scope of it is staggering, and in a way, I think, unfortunately, these people in the Trump administration they sort of have a boundless imagination for harm. And you know, I'll speak for myself. I'm not as quick. So we are sort of inevitably kind of, you know, the imagination for response. It is a constant effort to kind of try to keep the imagination and the creativity around responding at pace with what is happening in Washington. And so when I look back over the last several months, I really think about our efforts in phases. So the first phase of legislative response really focused on the protection of people's rights. And this really goes back to before Trump took office. I mean, when I was working for the state as the policy director, we were responding to a Supreme Court that was shredding our rights and liberties. So we passed legislation in anticipation of and in response to the Dobbs decision to do everything we could to shore up abortion rights, to protect New Yorkers from legal incursions, protect providers of reproductive health from legal persecution by other states, and so forth. And we did legislative response to the Supreme Court's efforts to shred our gun laws. And so that work of how do we protect New Yorkers' rights, that was sort of work that had been going on and has obviously expanded enormously. So I am proud and active as a co-sponsor of the New York For All Act, which I think would provide critical protections to undocumented New Yorkers by preventing state and local law enforcement from cooperating with ICE in most instances. I am a proud co-sponsor of legislation that would expand the legal shield protections that we've started to put in place for medical professionals who are providing reproductive health care and who are providing gender-affirming care. I am a co-sponsor of legislation that would expand the universe of spaces that are protected from immigration crackdowns, and a number of other bills that endeavor to use the power of the state to protect the rights of New Yorkers and to shield against legal persecution by both the federal government and their partners in the most conservative states in the union. So that was kind of phase one. Phase two was the process of thinking about where state government can step in a proactive way where the federal government has stepped back or where efforts are being shut down. So we spoke early on with the Attorney General's office and asked the question, what are the areas where state law needs to be beefed up to enable state enforcement where federal enforcement may no longer be happening? And an area that they highlighted was on housing discrimination. Historically, we as a state are reliant on both federal law and federal jurisprudence to enforce and protect New Yorkers from housing discrimination under the Fair Housing Act of 1968. Not, by the way, incidentally, Donald Trump was one of the very first defendants of a housing discrimination enforcement action by the federal government in 1974, I think it was. So it was no surprise that in the first Trump administration, they moved to tear up what is known as the disparate impact standard, which is the sort of central piece of jurisprudence to enforcing housing discrimination. And what it basically means is to say, if you want to prove housing discrimination, you don't need to prove what is in the heart or the mind of a landlord or a broker in terms of that they intend to discriminate. You just simply need to show that the effects of their actions are discriminatory. And the Trump administration tried to tear that up in the first Trump administration. The Biden administration put it back on the books. It is now a target again of the Trump administration, and I introduced legislation that would put that standard on the books under state law so that Tish James and the Division of Human Rights have all the tools that have historically been available to them to protect New Yorkers from housing discrimination. We then worked with the Attorney General's office, and this is probably my #1 legislative priority for this session, to expand previous legislation to dramatically expand the ability of the state Attorney General's office to enforce consumer protection laws in the state of New York. I think one of the really terrific developments in our federal government of the last 20 years was the establishment of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And the federal government got into consumer protection in a big way. And one of the first things that the new Trump administration has done is shut down, effectively, the CFPB and shut down consumer protection at the FTC. And so this bill, which is officially what is known as an Attorney General's program bill, it is sort of a bill that has the official imprimatur of the Attorney General. I am the prime sponsor of it in the Assembly, and it's called the Fair Business Practices Act, and it would dramatically expand the state's consumer protection laws, which currently, despite New York being a deep blue state, we have one of the thinnest consumer protection laws in the country. Utah has a far more protective consumer protection regime than the state of New York does, and many other red states do as well. This would dramatically expand our consumer protection law, give the Attorney General broad new tools to protect consumers, and really fill in where the federal government is stepping out in this area, and I'm very determined to pass this bill this session. Thank you. And I introduced legislation together with Senator Jessica Ramos, who is the labor chair in the state Senate, in response to the mass federal layoffs. We have massive staffing shortages in New York State government in all kinds of critical areas. And we want, and the governor has said this, we want public servants who've been laid off by Donald Trump and Elon Musk, who have talent and expertise. It would be fantastic if they came and put that talent and expertise to work for New York. And in service of that, we've introduced legislation that would allow those employees to purchase pension credit in the New York State pension system for time that they spent and would lose as pension credit in the federal government, to kind of ease that transition. And I'm right now in the process of working with Senator Ramos and Harry Bronson, who is the Assembly Labor Committee chair, on legislation that would expand the jurisdiction of the state employment. We have something called the sort of slightly misnamed Public Employment Review Board, PERB, but it is actually not entirely limited to public employees. It includes a few classes of private sector employees. But by and large, worker protections and the right to organize and labor protections for private sector employees historically have fallen under the domain of the National Labor Relations Board and the National Labor Relations Act. And there is every reason to expect that we will see the footprint of the National Labor Relations Board narrow. And so, modeled on legislation that's been introduced in Massachusetts and in California, I'm working on a bill right now that would effectively create an automatic mechanism for the jurisdiction of our state PERB to expand to cover any employees who lose protections under the National Labor Relations Act because the Trump administration narrows its jurisdiction. That's the kind of second bucket of Trump legislative response, which is how do we strengthen state government to fill in where the federal government is narrowing. Yeah, exactly. And then the last bucket, which is the hardest, but in some respects the most exciting, is how do you directly fight back? How do you muster power and energy to, in some form or fashion, fight back? And it's hard because that asymmetry of power really kicks in. Indict them. Well, that is certainly outside my power. But I have written legislation called the Recourse Act, which is a slightly strained acronym that is the Reciprocal Enforcement of Claims on Unpaid or Reduced State Entitlements Act. And that's it. I got nothing else to say. I was able to remember that. And what this bill would do is, in a circumstance in which the federal government withholds funds that are owed to the state of New York in contravention of a court order, so unlawfully withholds money that we are owed, this bill would authorize the state of New York, it requires the unanimous action of the governor, comptroller, and state budget director, would authorize the state of New York to withhold payments to the federal government. Now I will be straightforward with you. They have a lot more money they can hold up from us than we can hold up from them. But I believe that we have to stand up to bullies, and we have to find every lever we can to fight back, and we have to give ourselves as much leverage as we can in the event that we are, for example, in a fight in the courts over money, which we are going to be. And so this legislation is aimed at building some of that power and deterrence and force. What's that? Add attorney's fees. So that is a sort of, and I should add, by the way, that I've also been reaching out to legislators in states across the country because I believe that there are tools that will be more effective done in concert. So, for example, we did an analysis of how much money, if all of the states that had trifectas, where you have Democrats controlling both houses of the legislature and the governor's office, if they all passed a version of the Recourse Act, how much money we could hold up. You get somewhere approaching $100 billion. If you add in cities, because in many cases, I actually think the amount of money that the city of New York hands over to the federal government that actually passes through city bank accounts is greater than that which the state of New York holds. You get to some real power. Likewise, when it comes to revenue generation, I've introduced a bill called which I think you guys, and I'm grateful to this, included in your advocacy letter, called the Mega Corporations Act, which, in my view, does a very simple thing. It basically says, if you're a multinational corporation, your corporate income tax, which gets calculated, by the way, based on your share of profits in New York. We're not taxing profits you make elsewhere. We wouldn't do it. We don't do it now. We wouldn't do it under my bill. But what my bill says is that when we calculate your share of profits that are attributable to New York, we're going to include in that accounting profits that are showing up on the balance sheets of your international subsidiaries. Because what is happening is an enormous amount of appropriately New York attributable profits are being lost to accounting games and international profit shifting. Something like 20% of state corporate income taxes nationally are being lost to this. We're losing about $737 million a year in the state of New York to this. And it's crazy, right? And we could recover that money without, this is not, just changing the methodology of accounting. Now that's $737 million in New York. That's close to $20 billion nationally. So think of the power if all the states made that change simultaneously. Or alternatively, think about an increase in the corporate income tax that kicked in at a point at which the federal government was cutting the social safety net, and it kicked in in 20 states across the country and not just New York. So those kinds of ideas, I think, have real power. And last Friday, we convened a call with legislators from 10 different states together with the States Project, which is a group that some of you may have worked with, to discuss these strategies. And I'm looking forward, and that is going to be a recurring effort. And how could I forget the lead item in that Time story over there? Senator Hoylman Siegel and I introduced legislation that we announced a week ago Saturday in front of the Tesla showroom down in the meatpacking district that would direct the state to do a really much needed and public examination of the truly wasteful deal that the state of New York cut with Tesla in Buffalo. It is really a high form of irony that this guy who is doing untold damage to our institutions of government and our democracy in the name of saving taxpayer dollars and cutting waste and fraud and abuse is an exemplar of wasting taxpayer dollars and crony capitalism in Buffalo. And so we've put out a bill to really get at that, to create some transparency. We spent $1 billion on that factory, and Tom DiNapoli estimates that we've gotten something like a 54-cent return on every dollar invested. I mean, it's ridiculous. So that is just a sampling of the things that, and there's a lot of other stuff we're working on and that are not directly responsive to Trump, but I wanted to focus on this topic because I really believe, and I know you all believe this, that we are in uncharted territory. We are in a very scary moment. None of us really know how we get to the other side of this. But I think that it certainly requires moral clarity, and it certainly requires creativity, and it certainly requires a commitment to identifying every opportunity that we can to fight back, and that's what I'm trying to do in Albany. So I would welcome your questions on anything at all, on this topic or anything at all. And Danielle, do you want to MC so I don't run the risk of offending people based on who I call on or something like that?
I would be happy to MC, but I also want to say, I just want to riff on what Micah said at the end, which is that if we had more people like Micah in government and fewer people like Elon Musk and Donald Trump, we would all be better off. So when New York is going to secede, I nominate Micah to lead us. Okay, Judy and then Elizabeth, and then we'll come over here.
About that consumer protection bill?
Yes.
Is that part of the budget?
It is not part of the budget.
That'll be in the supplemental?
It'll be a standalone bill, and my aim is to get it passed this session.
Thank you.
Elizabeth, short and sweet, everybody.
Okay. Big law and big medicine, two major drivers.
Big law and big medicine, you said?
Big medicine.
Okay.
Cornell,
Yeah.
Columbia University,
Yeah.
Medical Center,
Yeah.
big drivers of economic activity in this state. Both are being attacked. Big law generates a whole lot of revenue in this city. These are not your committees, but what can you tell us about anything going on in the state legislature that might impact what the Trump administration is doing to law firms as well as our major universities?
There has been. I'll take the. Let me take a step back for a second, which is the tsunami that's coming at us is enormous financial pain. That is the thing that's coming at us, and we could face levels of cuts that exceed really any capacity that the state has to make up the difference. You know, if you look at you look at the amount of money, for example, that the federal government gives to our medical institutions. That is it's a daunting prospect to think about what it would take for us to fill that gap, and that's the tip of the iceberg. And so the short answer, Elizabeth, is I think that at this moment, in terms of the financial impact and the financial cuts that we're already seeing to medical institutions that again, I think is just the beginning, I don't think at the moment we as a state have really reckoned with it. And there's a challenging dynamic, which is there's an impulse to want to get ahead of it and to want to say, let's, particularly we're doing a budget right now, let's try to anticipate what's coming down the pike and start filling the hole now. I think there is a legitimate concern that doing that could lead to a self-fulfilling prophecy and make it easier for the federal government to say, look, New York in their budget, they just raised all this revenue, they put it away in a fund to fill all our cuts. All the more reason we can make those cuts. And so I think that there is going to be, in general, there's going to be the financial response to Trump and the cuts that are coming is going to be reactive. I'm not sure that's the wrong thing. More generally, on what Trump is doing to these institutions, it is truly a fascistic playbook. I mean, you read the play-by-play of what happened at Paul Weiss with Brad Karp, the managing partner of Paul Weiss, going down to Washington, sitting down with this guy, and basically kissing his ring and putting out this obsequious statement. And well, it's a big corporate law firm, but it certainly has a liberal history, liberal legacy, and Columbia, the same thing. And just today or yesterday, they announced $1 billion in cuts to Cornell. I'm a little bit at a loss. I think that to some extent these are questions for these institutions, and just as I think we are coming to terms with what we're facing, I think these institutions need to come to terms with what they're facing and recognize that bending the knee is not and has never been a good long-term strategy when dealing with fascists. And the press. And I do think, what we saw with Wilmer and Jenner, who decided instead of taking the Paul Weiss play that they're going to sue and fight, and Perkins, yeah. So my hope is that we will see more of this. I have received some suggestions on how to put the state's thumb on the scale for institutions that are making those choices, and to help them and encourage that. And I certainly will continue to explore those ideas.
So, yes, ma'am.
Hi, this is a really recent example, but yesterday Trump passed an executive order that's coming after states' climate protections.
Yes.
Do you know what New York can do to respond to that?
So the executive order that the Trump administration put out yesterday, which was targeted in particular at the Climate Superfund Act in New York, I think it is a pretty unenforceable order. I don't think it is going to have, frankly, much of an effect on our climate laws and on the Climate Superfund Act. I mean, so that's one. As with congestion pricing, frankly, that I'm not particularly sure that we have a ton to worry about. I think we have, the Attorney General is litigating every single one of these things and having a pretty good run of things. But I don't think the federal government really has. We passed a law, the Climate Superfund Act, that basically said we're going to make an accounting for the harm that big polluters did, the harmful impacts of their products on the state of New York. We're going to assess the financial cost of that, and we're going to charge them for it. And that is, you know, I think that is a lawful and constitutional thing. I think it was always something that was going to get challenged in court by the companies that were going to have to pay the price for it. But I don't think Donald Trump signing a piece of paper directing Pam Bondi to, you know, stop enforcement of the Climate Superfund Act, which is effectively, I think, what that EO said. I don't think that's going to have a lot of weight.
Yes. Shoshana. I'm calling on you. You have the mic. You don't even have to walk anywhere.
Hello.
Hello.
So you talked about equal access to housing. I have questions regarding emergency housing in New York City. There's like a 2.5-year long wait list for even emergency vouchers.
Yeah.
What is the plan of New York State in conjunction with New York City to speed up that process and make it easier for New Yorkers in need to get access to housing?
Sure. Thank you for the question. We have far fewer vouchers. We have far fewer vouchers than we have people who are in need of them. I mean, that is the basic. Although I commend to everybody, by the way. There's a story in the Times this morning on people who are living in employment-focused homeless shelters. It is the most devastating story, and one of the people that they profiled in that story talks about having had a voucher and having been unable to find an apartment with that voucher for like 2 years. So these are, you know, what I always would say about this is that the fundamental shortage of housing that we have in New York creates dramatically increased prices and puts pressure on every part of the market, and that is a piece of the puzzle that we can't forget about. But I am a proud co-sponsor of legislation to create housing access vouchers in the state of New York, which would effectively be a state Section 8 program to enable people who are homeless or who are on the precipice of homelessness to receive financial assistance and expand the pool of vouchers to at least provide some relief on that wait list.
This side? Anybody else? Tony.
Hi, I get a New York City pension, and I received an email from my retirees organization saying that in the proposed budget, there is a proposal to reduce state contributions by about $8 billion to be made up in a decade. It seems to me that the pension system should be, to the extent possible, kept on sound actuarial basis without budget gimmicks.
Thank you, Tony. I'm glad you asked this because I'm going to take this opportunity just to speak about this issue for anyone who is a retiree in the room and may have received communications for it. The question pertains to a proposal that was in the executive budget that would, in effect, amortize a spike in the obligations that the state has to the state pension funds in the near term. And I'll put you at ease by saying that I don't think it's going to happen, at least not in the state budget. So for those who are concerned about it, I would say, fear not. But I would also say that that I don't think the way it is being characterized, I think there is some fear fanning that is going on with that proposal. It is, in effect, a smoothing out of obligations to reduce a spike in what has to come out of the state budget. And it's been done before. It was done after the financial crisis in 2007, 2008. We have one of the most soundly actuarially funded pension systems in America. New York we have not, since the fiscal crisis, had the problems that Illinois and many other states have. We rigorously and actuarially fund our pension funds. I don't think the smoothing would have changed that in any way. The one argument that I do sort of think has some merit is that if the markets, and I mean, this is a conversation I had 2 weeks ago, it's certainly been borne out. If the markets take a dive and the value of the pension funds contract significantly, that is going to result in a further spike in the employer, the government contribution that's necessary to maintain the funding levels of the pension fund. And so, if you've already gone to the well on amortization, and then the markets drop another 10 points, it then gets a lot harder to go to the well next year to do the same thing. So that, to me, given I think my hesitation about it is not that it would, I think, in any way jeopardize or create vulnerability for the pension funds. My hesitation on it is that it is a tool that is important to deal with market downturns, and unfortunately, we are, I think, in a moment where we may see a lot more downturn. So I do think, look, there's obviously a lot of internal to the union politics that is going on, particularly with the teachers, and I think that this has become a little bit of a football in that context, but I'll end where I started, which is I don't think it's happening, so it's sort of not to worry.
Gentleman in the green shirt, pink shirt, Liza, Wendy. Oh, I'm sorry. Then we'll switch back and forth. I can't see.
Thank you.
And please, I'm sorry, please keep your questions very brief so we can get to all of them.
This is a question, actually, recommendation. I and many others pay withholding tax, and I have a bit of control over how much tax I pay, and I kind of would like the feds not to get their money right away. I'd rather it went to New York State, if anything. Recommendations?
So what's interesting is that the bill on the Recourse Act, the bulk of the money that the state would be withholding from the feds, or let me not use the word withholding, the bulk of the money the state would be not giving to the federal government are the federal withholdings of state employees. That's the bulk of that money. And the reason why I was ultimately comfortable with advancing that bill is that an enforcement action around that, the employees have no exposure. So if the state has the legal exposure, so we wouldn't be putting people at risk. I am not going to give anybody advice on what they should do with their taxes, but I would say that that you create exposure for yourself. I obviously, when we talk about New York being a donor state, we send a lot more money to Washington than we get in return. Most of that money does not pass through the bank accounts of the state. Most of that money is paid directly from us to the federal government, or paid by our local businesses to the federal government, et cetera. And so the question, the kind of collective action problem of how you can leverage that money, it is certainly something I am noodling on, but I'm not here to tell you to, throw the tea in the harbor, at least not yet.
I'm sorry, I don't know your name. And then right there.
I'm wondering if there are any laws or can local or state law enforcement, do they have any power to stop the illegal abductions as opposed to deportations? I don't know. Of ICE, for instance, what can the state do to stop what ICE is doing?
I think the reality is that what the state must do, what the state needs to do, and what the state has not yet done is cease any cooperation with ICE. I don't know that it is realistic, wise, or practical that you'd end up with state or local law enforcement actually, duking it out with federal immigration officials on the street. But I do think that what we should be doing is saying we're not going to be party to that. And the reality is that the federal government does depend, in many instances, on the cooperation of state and local officials for that work. And our ceasing cooperation particularly outside of New York City. The police commissioner in New York City has said they will not participate in civil immigration enforcement. And so I think we should make that the standard across the state.
Except for, and then we'll get to Liza and Wendy, except for one thing, as Eric Adams has let ICE back onto
Yes, that
Rikers.
is right.
There's actually a rally tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock at City Hall Park for anybody who wants to go, because that is just unbelievable. Liza.
So I'm just curious, with the overwhelming onslaught of attacks from the federal government, how do you triage and prioritize what you focus on, and how can we help?
It's a great question. I have been in a mode, I have been not in a triaging mode. I have been in a mode of throwing as much against the wall as I can. That is the mode that I have been in. And I think we have to see, I think you all can use your voices, whether it's on social media or in the interactions you have with elected officials in other contexts or in club resolutions to speak out on bills that you believe and that would be meaningful in this moment. And I would love nothing more if some of the work that I've done, and I know it already has, would make it onto those lists. My sort of mode is try to generate as many ideas as we can, build alliances with colleagues in the legislature, find partners in the Senate, try to see what gets traction, and try to get some meaningful things done. I am, of the bills that I am the prime sponsor of, I believe we should and can get the housing discrimination bill done this session. I believe it will take some work, and there will be fierce opposition from portions of the business community, but I believe we can get the Attorney General's consumer protection bill done this session. Some of the more aggressive fight back bills, particularly the Recourse Act, really require a fundamental change in orientation by my colleagues in the legislature and by the legislative leadership. I think there is a real question, and I don't know the answer to it, and this is playing out in DC as well, which is, will there be a recognition that the framework for judgment that we are used to using no longer applies? And that the question of whether a bill, all of us, we're politicians. We are used to coloring inside the lines. And I think that's got to change. And I think the question, and I've come to that place, and I think the question is, do other people get there? And I think that's a message that you all have a role to play in sending as well.
The gentleman that I can't see, come a little closer so everybody can see.
Get too close to the okay. Am I okay here? Yes, stay there. Okay. I just want to quickly introduce, I'm a new member, but I was a member 30 years ago as well, and then I did. Thank you. My name is Alan Leidner. I'm on 299 Riverside Drive. The question is this. Clearly putting people out on the street, like we saw this past weekend, has its effect, and it had its effect 8 years ago, and it had its effect going back to the war in Vietnam and the protests there. How can we, in this neighborhood in particular, organize more effectively to put more people on the street and to do it in the most effective way possible?
Sure. Well, thank you for the question. I think there is probably no organization that's better at that than Three Parks. So you guys, yeah, I would give you applause. I think we're going to see more and more actions. I think participating in that, and then I think it may, I don't know how much the club, I gather the club has been doing some amount of discussion around specific issue areas. What are bills and actions that you want to see happen at the local, state, and federal level? Danielle mentioned the Adams administration letting ICE into Rikers. That should be something that this is an organization that, speaks out about and reaches out to your local elected officials and demands as much volume from us as we can muster. And so I think both participating in the broad actions, because I think they're terribly important in creating that tenor of moral clarity that I mentioned, but I think also being specific and sort of targeted about what are things that you want to see happen at each level of government, and picking some projects, you know.
I think we have time for one
Yeah,
more,
sure.
Micah. Elaine? I'm sorry, Elaine, before you say that, I don't want to lose what you just said, because I think it's really important that whether we're all doing something together or whether you're writing to your elected officials on the side, it's really important to write, and write frequently. There's not a lot our federal electeds can do in Washington right now, but letting them know what your issues are is super critical. Elaine.
Hi. Okay. I have two things, and they're related. And one is I'm very concerned about the upcoming mayoral election, that we don't have somebody like Cuomo come rolling in on it. And that we have a fair election, and that all ballots are counted, and that it's not hacked. We're also having foreign influence on our politicians from Turkey, from China, from Israel. And it's very concerning to me that that is coming into our elections too, okay? Now, one of the things that has come out is it's all one question, believe me. One of the problems that's come out is it's a little complicated. There are the swing states apparently were hacked, and they've been doing a lot of analysis on it, and it's moving on into the courts and so on about it. And also one of the counties in New York is showing this Russian tail hacking. Now, the hacking also is what happened in Georgia, the nation of Georgia. It happened in Romania. I am. Hang on. It's a complicated one, okay? And they've also found out some ties with Elon Musk about doing all this. And I have sent you this information very recently, okay? So what I'd like to know is Myrie, up in the legislature, has been doing a lot of wonderful voter enfranchisement work. Can you work with him? Can you investigate this stuff up in the legislature? That's your question.
Sure. I am remiss. You have sent me information on this, and I will dig into it and reach back out to you. I certainly, obviously, making sure that we have free and fair and uninfluenced elections is critically important. I will say I share your concern about the upcoming mayoral election. I don't know that I have the antidote to that. I will add, I am also sort of on a related note. Senator Hoylman Siegel and I are working on an effort. Elon Musk's plan when he purchased Twitter was to make it into what's called a super app. Basically a technological platform that goes well beyond social media. And it's actually something we don't really have in this country, but you may have heard of Alipay, which is an app in China that is used as both a broad communications platform and a broad payments platform. And X has now a partnership with Visa to turn into a significant payments platform. It has acquired significant AI capabilities, and what's interesting is that even before the Trump administration came back, there really was no clear federal regulatory authority over this construct of being a payments transmitter. To the extent there would be one, it would be the CFPB. It is now shut down. You become a payments transmitter by getting authorization from individual states. X has quietly received authorization from 41 of 50 states to be a payments transmitter, which would obviously, among other things, give it enormous power and access to a lot of information. New York is one of the 9 states that is not. not yet provided that authorization, and Senator Hoylman-Siegel and I are working on a letter to the Superintendent of Financial Services to make sure that that authorization is either not forthcoming or at the very least that there's appropriate diligence done before anything gets authorized. So we've got a lot of work ahead. I will just close by saying this. I heard that Three Parks got 2,800 petition signatures in this last period, which is an incredible credit to your district leaders and to your club members and people like Marion and Chuck and Michael and Rochelle who are out there, and many more. I'm going to get in trouble for not naming people. I obviously have been the beneficiary of that incredible activism and energy. But I will just tell you that when I am up in Albany trying to, bang my head against the wall to try to come up with this stuff and make slow progress, it is so unbelievably heartening to know that the energy and activism of this club burns stronger than ever. And so I just wanted to thank you for everything you have done and that you will do. So, thank you.
Give it more for Micah, more for Micah.
So before we go to the district leader report and special award, I just want to say that Wendy is sitting up front. Anybody here have postcards to return? And I also want to mention again that the Three Parks 50th anniversary benefit is Sunday, May 4th at the Ellington, which is at 105th Street and Broadway from 4 to 6, and you should all come and bring your friends. And I think, are we doing Dan first or Teresa first? Or? So I just want to give you Teresa Cantor, our district leader, because she really knocked herself out along with a whole bunch of other people, but really led the petition effort. And give it up for Teresa.
I'm afraid Micah's a very hard act to follow, but we'll do what we can. We're up here to thank you for all the work that you all did in petitioning. As Micah said, we filed 2,801 signatures with the Board of Election on April the 3rd. So how did we do it? Well, it is a county committee year, and we had 62 petitioners. Most of them were on the county committee, and they were out there trying to qualify their election districts. But it wasn't only just them. We had folks working at tables all through the district. We had Len and Steve Max along with Lorraine Zamora up at 104th Street and Broadway. They were there on Saturdays and Sundays, and we had Dan Cohen at 105th with his cohorts. And Chuck and I were at the Farmers Market on Fridays, on Broadway at 97th on Saturday and Sunday. In addition, all of these county committee people were back at their buildings collecting from their neighbors, from their block, from the neighborhood, and they were bringing all these signatures to us. So it was really a group effort, and I think everyone in this community saw at least one Three Parker out there during those 6 weeks, and they appreciated our being out there working for our endorsed candidates and for the community. But I also have special thanks to Doug Kellner, who did our cover sheets and oversaw the binding of our nominating petitions with the help of Chuck, Lynn Thomas, and Steve and Lynn and me. But we have a special award tonight for the Petitioning Rookie of the Year. And that goes to a brand new county committee member and a first-time petitioner who gathered 148 signatures. Wow, indeed, right? And that Rookie of the Year is Willie Smith. Come on up, Willie. We have a prize for you. And we do have 2 awards. We have a second award that goes to our longtime champion petitioner and mentor to Willie Smith, and that would be Mary Ann Marks. Mary Ann got 220 signatures. This is from Cynthia Doty's collection. I think it must be from one of the presidential conventions. But this is for you, Willie.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Willie, would you like to say something?
I'm too speechless right now, but I thank everyone that participated and give me signatures and everything. And we just keep hope alive. That's all I say. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mary Ann? Another Democratic donkey from Cynthia's collection.
Thank you so much.
Well, I don't know what to even say.
Mary Ann is speechless.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Before I wrap up, we do have honorable mentions. And those go to the members, the 8 members of the 3 Parks Dem 100 Plus Club. That means they all got at least 100 signatures on their petitions. Of course, Mary Ann and Willie are part of that, but we also have Chuck Wall. He actually got well over 200. And we have Lynn Max. Raise your hand. Michael Stearns. Farah Edelstein. Danielle Gerard. And me. So congratulations to all, and I hope you enjoyed meeting your neighbors and doing all this work, because I think it really does make a difference. They're seeing us out there. And if you did miss it this year, don't worry, we're going to do it again next year. So thank you.
Thank you to Teresa. She was one of the people who got over 100 signatures. All right, you're up. We give you Dan Cohen, our other district leader.
So another round of applause for Teresa, because she really worked her butt off and did a magnificent job. I provided moral support. So now that we have submitted our signatures, we're now turning to the mayoral election cycle. The primary is in June 24th, and we are now, the club's going to be shifting towards advocacy. We have endorsed one candidate for mayor, but there are several candidates who are worthy. And I want to focus not on necessarily the one candidate that we have endorsed to support, but broadly not supporting Andrew Cuomo. Now, maybe there are people in this room who favor him, but I have a memory when I was in the state committee, and then just like as a lifelong New Yorker, of what a mess he was when he ran the state, and I don't want him to be mayor. So there are people in this room who support Scott Stringer. There are people in this room who support Zellner Myrie, people who support Zoran Mamdani. Here we go, Zoran Mamdani supporters. And all the other candidates who are running. And it is upon you, people who are supporting those candidates, to convey to those campaigns that we need to have a comprehensive plan of cross endorsements, right? Because we're moving into a cycle where you get to choose up to 5 candidates for mayor. You just choose one, you throw away 4 other chances. You get to choose up to 5 in the primary. You get to choose up to 5 for all the city elections. But particularly for the mayor, if you are a supporter of Zellner Myrie, if you're a supporter of Zoran Mamdani, or a supporter of Jessica Gonzalez, or Jessica Ramos, or any of the other candidates who are running for mayor, it's important, it's critical that you convey to that campaign that we need to cross-endorse. We need to come up with a plan of who the 5 are so that we can prevent the second coming of Andrew Cuomo. That is your homework. And this club is going to be working very hard on trying to support progressive candidates for mayor. We've got like a 2.5-month sprint, and that's not a lot of time. But this time, 4 years ago, Catherine Garcia was, no one ever heard of her, and then in the span of about 6 weeks, she went from last to almost first, losing by about 10,000 votes to Adams. So we have a moment here. Please let us not squander it. Quick question, yes? So I think that the club has supported ranked choice voting, and the club has endorsed Brad Lander as its #1 choice for mayor. But I would be delighted if he were mayor. In fact, I'd be delighted with just about anybody. Maybe not Whitney Tilson. Any Whitney Tilson supporters in this room? Because I'd love to talk to you about why. But this is important. We have a moment here. This group. You are individually, any one of you is better educated, more informed, more influential than 99% of the New Yorkers right now. You know more, are involved more, are connected more. You have power to influence this decision, and I'm urging you to use it. The club is going to take steps to encourage it, but it is important for you individually, when you talk to campaigns, when you get literature from them, when they ask you for money, to respond and say, yes, I'm supporting you, Brad Lander. What are you doing to create a coalition to prevent Andrew Cuomo from getting elected mayor? Quick question, then I got to move on. Yeah.
One of the things that, they want me to use this. I brought my own, by the way, but I don't know if it works. One of the things the club should be doing, and I think I've seen this in the past, and I've been involved with voting and stuff, and we need to educate the voter on how to utilize the ranked choice voting. People don't understand how to use it and how it can influence, and we really need to promote that and educate them on how to do it and how to walk into the poll site and actually use the ranked choice to their advantage and our advantage.
Thank you, Alex. I agree with you, and I think that's something that we're going to make.
Thanks for listening.
We're going to make a priority as we go forward. So I would now, thank you, Alex. I want to make sure that, yes, Steve.
Just want to mention, I was at a meeting with Brad Lander a couple of nights ago, and the same question came up about other candidates. And as you know, Working Families has endorsed a range of candidates, including Brad. And Brad says that he's working with the other candidates and will come up closer to the election with his view of how to do the ranked choice, precisely to prevent the election of Andrew Cuomo. So it's not that he isn't thinking about that. They are working on it. You know, you have to make the deal for the cross endorsement of the ranking with whoever is going to be the lowest vote getter, because that's the person who's going to drop off first and whose votes will get redistributed first, and it's too early to see that at the moment. But the club will absolutely be campaigning for Brad, and we're going to be doing literature distributions at subway stops and street tables and visibility and all of those things.
Great, thank you. I now would like to turn the floor over to State Committeeman Doug Kellner, who election law extraordinaire, who can also give us some quick updates of a conference he just attended. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dan. So I'll start with the good news that no one filed petitions against our district leaders or county committee. And there are no objections, so that everyone is effectively reelected. And congratulations to all of you. Lynn Thomas couldn't make it here tonight. She got called to work overtime and wasn't able to get out from under it. But Lynn and I are the state committee members from this assembly district. Now, the state committee is sort of like the county committee. It has very few official functions. It only meets every couple of months. And there are 700 members of the state committee, although because we come from a very heavily Democratic district, Lynn and I actually have more than 2% of the votes, even though there are 698 other members. But notwithstanding that there's no official business that needs to be done by the state committee, our state chair, Jay Jacobs, has called a special meeting for next week to talk about what the state party should be doing. And this is in response to a lot of people throughout the state saying that it's very important that we focus on what it means to be a Democrat, especially in this age where our lowercase democratic institutions are not being threatened, but are actually being eroded away day by day because of the deluge from the Trump administration and the Republicans who we used to think were people of good faith who are standing by and saying nothing. And there's nothing worse when you look at the history of fascist takeovers and the loss of democracy in other countries historically. It's always happened because good people stand back and say nothing. And then they find it's too late to stop it. And so I'm hoping that we can get that message to our fellow Democrats in this special meeting next week to convey just how important it is to remain focused on what it means to be a Democrat, what it means to fight this oppression, no matter how difficult it is. So I think that's really the news. You know, some woman before talked about our elections, and some of you may know that I used to be elections commissioner and also played a national role in talking about election integrity. And we do need to continue to focus on that. We need to push the City Board of Elections when it buys new voting machines, and it is going to have to buy new voting machines soon, to buy machines that have a voter verifiable paper audit trail and to continue their practice of strong audits. But I was talking with the chairman of Verified Voting, who is based in San Francisco, California, and it's a big national organization. And she was talking about issues in New York. And I said, in New York, we have hand counts in close contests as well as a random audit in all contests. And so the integrity of the voting machine isn't necessarily the biggest issue. What is the biggest issue? The biggest issue is making sure that everybody gets registered to vote, because if you're not registered and you can't vote, that's a vote that's taken away from you. And then in terms of the integrity, instead of just focusing on the voting machines, focus on the whole voting process. We now have 20% of our vote coming through the mail. Well, the actual most vulnerable part of the voting process is the accounting for the ballots through the mail system to make sure that the ballot that the voter puts in the mailbox actually gets to the Board of Elections and is counted. So that's my little take on that geeky little election integrity issue. Trump is interesting because he issued this executive order on elections that is as crazy as so many things he's done. The president has virtually no power over any of the aspect of it, and yet he was ordering other people to do things to make it more difficult to vote by requiring voter ID from everyone, by encouraging purges of the voting registration system, which is just the opposite of what we need to do. Yeah, we don't want to keep dead people on the rolls. We don't want to keep people on the rolls after they've moved. It's harder than you may think in order to do that without removing good people and then who show up to vote and find out that they're no longer registered. So that's a crazy thing. Trump ordered everyone to use a voter verifiable paper ballot system, which is great, but he left out the most important part is that if you have a voter verifiable paper ballot system, you have to have audits. If nobody looks at the paper, then it's just a waste of effort to do that. So a number of, well, first of all, most of the people who are responsible and actually have authority of this, at least in New York, are just ignoring the executive order. The crazy thing is that in red states, you have some election officials who want to suck up to the president and are taking steps, including people who even 2 years ago saying that some of the things that Trump was proposing make no sense at all. I could talk about Kansas and Chris Kobach, who had been Secretary of State of Kansas, had put in an early voting system in Kansas. The president says they want to remove it, and all of a sudden they do a complete 180 and say, yes, sir, whatever you want, we'll do it, no matter how ridiculous it is. And that just illustrates again the principle that we need to have principles. We need to know what it means to be a Democrat, to want to live in a democracy where the majority rules. And yes, the majority voted for them, but they didn't vote for them to do unconstitutional and illegal actions. Everybody was working off of the assumption that we would honor our traditional institutions that assure a representative government. And instead, many people are learning how that's entirely backfired, and we need to stand strong to stop it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Doug. Truer words were never spoken. Unless there's something else that I'm missing, Wendy Diller is going to be at the back of the room. She has a few more postcard packets to hand out. And otherwise, I believe we're adjourned. So thank you all very much for coming. Great meeting. Thank you.